Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
I'm Eric Alexander with Acorn Grove.
Welcome to the Wealth and Income Podcast. Today we are going to do another case study. This is a couple that we are working with that is in their early mid-30s looking to retire early. Not
Yeah.
the traditional I'm working till 65, but I want to be done by 50. Not that they are going to be done in the traditional sense, which seems to be a theme right now with people we're working with, but really in the sense that they want to take a step back and have the option to be done so that they can pursue other hobbies and passions and other business ideas as well, which I personally love for them.
When we were walking through this ahead of time, I thought that was a great idea. Some of the things that they were trying to create, but they needed the space to create it.
It is really kind of interesting. When we did the dreams list, there were only a couple of things that showed up for this couple. One was travel. That was absolutely the thing that was most important to them. They're 33 and 34 years old and are pretty sure that they are not interested in having kids. And so they're really just like, yeah, we want to travel and we want to eventually create a maker space, which I thought was pretty neat. That's not something I had spent a lot of time thinking about prior to this. So getting to hear what that would entail and, getting woodworkers in there and artists in there and just creators all in one space was really motivating for them.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
So let me give you the demographics of what they look like, what they're doing. So at 33 and 34, they said, hey, we want to retire at age 50, 51, kind of that time frame. So we're looking at about 17 years. And as a couple, they're bringing in about 375 a year. So very, very healthy earners. But I will tell you, I started working with them probably 2 or 3 years ago. And just that recently, they combined were making about half of that. So they have worked really hard to move up in their careers. As they got into their 30s, they started taking on more responsibilities at work. And I think they have a good trajectory ahead of them. But for starters, I think everything comes back to income. And while they've increased their income substantially, they have not increased their lifestyle along with it, which makes these conversations pretty exciting because they're like, oh my gosh, we would have to work so hard to blow this much money on travel.
Right. But again, kudos. We had another case study talking about that. Some people that had changed their income fairly dramatically. And another great kudos for them on that. Like, it's so easy to have that lifestyle expansion and to just let it go crazy.
For this couple, what's really interesting, I asked them, why didn't you buy a bigger house or take fancier trips or any of that? I think their answer is really mature for people in their early 30s because the commentary was, we want to be done at 50 and we know we want to be done at 50 and we want to have the freedom to travel and do those things. But we already know we don't want to work until we're 65. When you think about that context, I think frequently people trade what they really want for what they want right now because they don't know what they really want. So right now matters more than a path directly to that. So if you're working a high pressure job and you're 33 and you already know that in 17 years you want the freedom to spend your time doing whatever the heck you want, then I think that takes reframing what you're doing now. And they take multiple trips a year.
It's not sitting around.
Advising or anything like that. They live in a decent part of town and they're very happy with where they live and they like the trips that they're taking. And so they're like, we want to start socking this away because we could be done as early as even 45. We'd be all about that. And so it shows not that they're giving something up, which I think a lot of times we would look at how much they're saving and be like, oh my gosh, so much sacrifice. But for them, it doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like actively progressing towards the things that are really important to them. And that's why knowing what your dream life looks like is so key.
Yeah, that ideal end state, right? If the clearer you can get on the ideal end state allows you to have that friction of, okay, here's what I really, really, really want. Here's what I'm doing. It's either compatible or it's not, right? And it's very easy. I think if you don't have that clear ideal end state, then it's like, I want a Ferrari. I want more trips. I want to, something else fills in that space that's, what did you call it the other day? A thin desire, right? It's not thick.
Yeah. Well, I would love to be able to take credit for that, but those terms came from Luke Burgess in his book Wanting. That is such a fantastic book for anybody who is in the process of trying to figure out what is it that I really want. It's really explains the science of desire and how much of what we think we want comes from other people. And a thin desire is something that we want because other people want it, whereas a thick desire really comes from inside of you as opposed to external motivation. So I love that they've already figured this out. Honestly, they're probably more mature than I am. I feel like I'm still on the quest to figure out what is most important to me. But for them to have already figured it out, I think is really cool. So let me tell you a little about them. Between the two of them, they have about $250,000 already saved up in their 401ks. And then cash investments that they have ready to be deployed above and beyond their kind of safety net is another, call it $50,000, give or take, $50,000. And so we just started by doing a quick progression to say, if you never saved another penny between now and age 50, how much would you be able to spend each year? And when we're doing these projections, I like to use a 6% rate of return,
Right.
not because that's what we're shooting for, but because more money is never a problem. So if we're conservative and we get where we want to go, then if we do better than that, which I generally hope that we do, then more money isn't a problem. But if I use a higher rate of return and we don't get it, it's always a problem. And so just for the sake of projection, when we're building initially, we use a conservative rate. So essentially, if they retire at 50, that gives them about 24,000 of income per year. They already did that before they really spent any time doing plan implementation. Even though we talked to them a couple years ago, they weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on everything. And they finally were like, we're here. We think we're grounded. We've got our emergency fund. Now it's time for us to hit the gas and start going forward. So I started to ask them how much they're saving. And I think this is going to blow your mind. So he's putting about 17.5 into his 401k.
Right.
She's putting in another 20,400 per year. And then she's getting a match, which is about 50% of that number.
Right.
And then between the two of them, on an after-tax basis, they're saving another $70,000 a year. So when you think about that, that's a lot. In order to save that way, because it's a combination of pre-tax dollars and after-tax dollars, that's essentially $140,000 of their salary earnings that is either being earmarked to savings and taxes. And on 375, that is a huge dollar amount to be putting away. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, I hope my kids are that disciplined.
Yeah, because what is that? Right, 30%? I'm having to do math.
They're willing to do that. And that 140, that doesn't count the 10 that's being matched. So when you count the 10 that's being matched, it's 150. And then he actually has some stock grants that he's getting, but the company he works for is not a public company, so he doesn't have any way to value them. So we left those completely outside of the model for right now because he's like, I don't know how to count them, so just pretend they're not there. Which again speaks to how conservative they are. So if they just do things the conventional way and they carry on the path that they're carrying on right now, we leave all the rates of return the same. And we look at sort of the conventional thought process around how to distribute the assets. It actually, all in total at retirement, will create about 131,000 of income per year.
And that's the traditional all investment path.
All investments all the time kind of model. And so what that shows is the new money they're saving is really creating about 107, 108 of income.
Right.
But remember, they had to earn 140 and really they're saving closer to that 150 number in order to get to top line 107. So they're, for every dollar they're saving in income that they aren't living off of today, it's not generating a full dollar of income every year of their retirement. And so you look at that and essentially they're saving $3 to get two in retirement.
Yeah, it's about 70%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a phrase that I think you started saying around the office, and now it's like all I can think about when I'm looking at plan building. And it is, you asked, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right. I love that phrase.
And I'm like, it doesn't seem like it to me. And so I actually asked them, do you feel like that juice is worth the squeeze? And they were like, not really, but we don't know what else to do. And so I think really just explaining the whole process of balancing rate of return and distribution rate was such a key part of their understanding.
If you look at it mathematically, the juice is totally worth the squeeze, even in the inefficient model, because they're going to save 150 grand a year for 17 years and they're going to be retired for 40
Longer.
so
Right.
so if we're doing that math, but I think the human emotion component comes in, because it'll take you 3 or 4 steps to get down to, yeah, mathematically it makes sense, but the initial brush with it, it's like saving 150 to get 107. There's a giant trombone in the back of my brain going womp womp, right? Like that's not exciting.
That's all I get. I totally agree with that. And that really, I think, was sort of what they were discovering when we went through this. So when we get into this, I think the teaching part of this is so key. And I think for especially people who are just joining us, or even people that have been listening for a while that need a refresher, we teach 2 key strategies, which are meant to optimize your ability to take income, both at a higher rate and for longer periods of time, and to do so with high degrees of safety. And so one of those options is a simulated pension, and the other is something that we call a volatility buffer. And in the simulated pension option, if you retire early, the payout rates are lower because you're going to be receiving checks for a much longer period of time until life expectancy and even life potential. So the way that's structured, the younger you retire, the lower your payout rates are on the simulated pension. And so an early retirement sometimes is a little difficult if you start with that strategy. But the second strategy is the volatility buffer that allows you to take income, keep your assets earning for you, and you can always move into the simulated pension as you get older and the payout rates get higher. So there's a lot of flexibility for how you actually do this in practice. But we went through and kind of explained, here's how you need to save today in order to have these outcomes in the future. And here are the results. One of the other things here is that you notice that I said they were coming pretty close to maxing out their 401ks. And so we had a lot of conversation about whether or not that made sense if they're retiring at 50.
Yep, that's a great point.
Because you can't really easily tap into that until 59 and a half.
Without the 72 Ts and a bunch of other tricks on that side. So yeah, absolutely. That's a great point.
So a 72T, for those of you that have never heard that term before, allows for a systematic distribution from a 401k prior to 59 and a half, as long as it is done for a specific period of time. And that period of time, I think, is either 5 years or until you're
59 and a half.
59 and a half, whichever is longer. So in their case, if they retired at 50, they would have to take systematic distributions for 9.5 years, regardless of what the market is doing. And that to me is always a little bit dangerous, because if the market takes a loss and you pull more money out, that's not a good situation. So my recommendation to them was, let's rethink whether or not all of this money needs to go to the 401k. If it is being matched, we are not giving that up, because that is free money. But for dollars not being matched, those can be redirected to an account that they could tap into for at least the 10-year time period before they got to retirement. So after all of our adjustments and the introduction of a balance between investments and permanent insurance products to get us where we want to go, we end up in a position where if they retire at 50, if they do the simulated pension option, they have between 180 and 200, depending on really the interest rate environment they find themselves in and how they structure that income. And if they choose to do the market shock absorber example, it's between 160 and 180, just depending on how many years of cushion they actually want to have. At 163, that gives them 9 years of essentially safety, where if they need to take their income from a source other than the stock market, we will have funded that. They can do that, and their portfolio will continue to perform for them. And I think that's a big deal, because if you retire at 50, you're talking about potentially 40, 50 years.
Yeah, of being retired.
Right. That's a lot of pressure on your assets. And so what I think was really fun about this is right now they're living on just over 200,000 of income per year. The way their careers are headed, they're probably going to earn more and save more along the way. But the ability at 50 to take a $200,000 a year income sustainably for the rest of your lifetime allows you to make different choices about how hard you want to work and where.
Yeah. And even if they take the more conservative approach, because they've got 50 years to go and you're looking at somewhere, I think you said somewhere maybe between 160 and 180. One of the things you mentioned about him was he's like, I can't imagine not doing anything. I'm not
Right.
going to go sit and watch Oprah all day or whatever the story is, right? I'm going
Mhm.
to go create a maker space or go do some other things. Well, now he can go do that and he doesn't have to recreate his entire income.
Right.
And you talked about this a couple podcasts ago, but our mission is to help people create space to create an intentional life. And I think so many people want to go create different components in their lives, but their lifestyle, their nut has gotten so big that they can't take that step back because there's so much there. They can't afford it. And as true adults are doing, they can't let the people around them down. So if at 50, they get to go do that other piece of it and they only need to cover maybe 30 grand, 40 grand, especially people like this that are 5 minutes into their career and they're already making 375. And they've got some horsepower mentally and career
Right.
wise. Recreating 30, 40, 50 shouldn't be a problem.
Right. They can find somewhere that they can probably earn that. And to me, that's what this is about. It's about the freedom to do the things that matter to you. Sometimes we talk to people and you can kind of tell maybe they're going to self-sabotage or maybe they need extra hand holding on something to help keep them on track or the reminder. This couple is so far ahead of so many people because they know who they are, they know what they want, and they are actively looking for the path that will get them there. And this is a very baseline strategy that we've given them. It doesn't involve anything other than reallocating where they're saving money today and decreasing their overall risk profile to get them so much further. If they decide, hey, I want to add a vacation rental or a regular rental or some other investment opportunity, that gets even better. So
Yeah.
this is sort of the starting point. And if they have better rates of return, it's better. I mean, there's so many things that would make this plan or this strategy even more exciting. And then just because I wanted to know, I ran the numbers of what would happen if they did work till 65, a traditional retirement age.
Yeah.
And just staying the course right now, never saving anything extra, it puts them at about 550 of income forever until they
Right.
graduate from the planet. And if a legacy is important to them, nieces, nephews, that sort of thing, charities, they can leave it. And if not, they can increase their income well beyond the 550 mark.
That's a lot of travel.
Sure, it is. Even
Uh,
with bacon inflation, it's still fantastic living, right? And so I was pretty excited about this. And, it's always funny at the end of it when you're like, man, I crushed it. And they're like, well, what if we could save more? I'm like, be careful trading what you want
right.
now for the future because you're already on a great path. But if you get to do everything you want and you have money left over, for sure, let's move in that direction. Just don't feel like you have to.
I think that's such sage advice on that side, Mary. That idea of don't forget what you're doing and why you're enjoying your life right now. Like what is really important to you is the travel. Don't give up the travel to go save more money just to go travel.
Right.
Right. What was the story about the guy that was on the fishing trip with the guide and he was 20 years old and he's like, I wake up, I work 2 or 3 hours a day, and then I go home and I sit on the beach. He's like, if you built this massive empire of boats and fishing tankers and blah, 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 then you could have so much more money. And he's like, well, then what would I do with it? He says, well, then you could move out here to this island and sit around all day and drink beer and fish on the dock or do whatever. He was like, dude, I can do this right now. I don't have to wait till I'm 70 to go do this. And I think that idea of helping them a little bit with the find the balance
Permission
of life.
to enjoy.
Yeah. And knowing for the first time in their lives, like I pull this lever, I get this thing, or at least I'm on the path, is such a freeing thing to know that on the other end, if I go spend that money, it's guilt free. Because
Right.
I adulted everywhere else. I did all the things I'm supposed to do. It's okay. Versus the shame of, no, I need to be saving more. I should.
You make a good point because that is one of my biggest issues with the conventional approach is that there's a lot of should happening. It's all about you should be doing this. It's all about fear. It's all about minimizing where you are today. And I think there's a balance. I think at some point you have to recognize that even though it is prudent to plan for the future and build all of that, there's no guarantee you're going to live it. And
Yep.
so you have to strike the balance between being totally present and also planning. for all the things that can come along the way. And the
Yeah.
older I get, the more I find that balance is the key in almost everything. Moderation in everything is the answer.
Somebody told me it's not balance, it's harmony. Some moments are
There
going
you
to
go.
take higher, right? So
Well, and I think too, if they were planning to work till 65 and were excited about working till 65, then yeah, maybe do things a little differently. But if the thing that gets you up and makes you work hard in the morning is knowing that you're on a path that gives you complete freedom to do whatever you want by the age of 50, then lean in,
yeah.
do those things if that's what's getting you excited.
Yeah. And I was doing the math while you were talking about their savings rate. They're saving 40% when you kind of balance it all in.
The top line.
Correct. And one of the things that we've seen sort of national averages and everything else is national average people are saving somewhere around 4 to 5%. So they're saving 10x their friends. When you look at sort of what they should be saving, it's probably closer to 15 to 20%. And they're even double that. So that idea of finding that balance of the should, if you're saving 3%, you should be saving more. I will give you that should right there. If you're saving 40%, okay, maybe there's a little bit of wiggle.
Here,
Yeah.
depending on what you're trying to do. I remember a conversation when Mike and I were first married where a relative said, I don't think you really make that much money. I don't know why it came up, our salaries or any of our income information, but it did. And they were like, I've seen the way you live. I don't think you make that much money. And both of us just thinking, what? We live like this because it's like, first of all, what did we have to do? We were young, unmarried. Neither of us really had jobs that permitted us to travel a whole lot. So there's like nothing, like once you have a big screen TV when you're 25, what else do you need? Right?
Popcorn and a video game system. What else?
Our cars were totally paid for. Like there was nothing for us to do. So it was almost a game to see how much money we could save and how quickly so that we could start to get into some of these strategies and some of the stuff that we did with real estate and all of that. There seems to be this perception of I have to be super showy if I want to be, I'm going to use air quotes, rich. And I think a lot of times the people who really have the most money, you would have no idea. I had a neighbor that would walk in wearing like ripped jeans with his shirt untucked, and he was the adult, I was the child. And I said, you should tuck your shirt in. We're going to a nice restaurant. And he said, why would I do that? And I said, because they treat you better when you look nice. And he goes, I want to know how they treat you when you don't have anything. That's what matters. And he owned a plane and probably 15 gas stations and
Right.
made a good, healthy income. But I just remember being really flabbergasted. But he's like, this is how you know people's actual character is how they treat when they don't have anything that they think they can get from you. And that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. If you drive up in a Bentley or you drive up in a Toyota Corolla, how are they treating you?
Probably differently, right? For sure. Okay, if they're looking for you, Eric, because they have questions, where can they find you?
You can find me at Acorn Grove wherever you use social media. How about you?
I am at The Wealth Woman. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Mary Lyons and Eric Alexander are registered representatives